Today, let's begin the second part of Hebrews 3. We're going to begin in verse 7. It warns the uncommitted explorers not to harden their hearts against the gospel through repeated rejection as their forefathers had done in the book of Numbers. And to understand these verses, you really need to know the story that takes place in Numbers chapters 13 and 14 about the 12 spies. Many of you are already familiar with it, but in that passage, Moses sent 12 spies, one from each of the tribes of Israel, over into the land of Canaan to spy out the land and to come back and report on what they found. Well, after exploring the land for 40 days, the 12 spies returned and they said, "Oh yes, look at the fruit of the land. There was a cluster of grapes so big 2 men had to carry it on a pole between them." They said, "It does indeed flow with milk and honey. But if you think the grapes are big, you ought to see the size of the guys that eat them. They're giants. We're like grasshoppers in their sight. There's no way we could ever defeat them. Their cities are walled up to heaven." Grasshoppers? Really? Do you get the kind of feeling that maybe there's a little bit of panicky exaggeration going on here? But 2 of the spies, Joshua and Caleb, said, "Wait a minute. Our God has promised to give us the land, and he's bigger than any giant. Our God will give us the victory over those giants. It's ours for the taking. Let's just go get them." But the people listened to the 10 and not the 2. And they accused Moses of having brought them all this way just to kill them and their children. And they talked about stoning Moses and getting another leader to take them back into Egypt. And then God came down, all fire and smoke. And he said, "After all my signs and wonders, I've guarded you, I've guided you, I provided for you, and all that you've done this whole journey has been to whine and complain, and I put up with it. I've given you chance after chance to show your trust in me, but now you've rebelled one time too many. You're a stiff-necked people. You'll never obey my voice. You don't want to enter the land of Canaan? Fine, then I won't let you enter the land of Canaan. You're going to spend the next 40 years, a year for every day they spied in the Canaan. You're going to spend the next 40 years dropping like flies across this wilderness. And someday, 40 years from now, I'm going to let the next generation enter the land that you would not enter. And the only ones of this generation that are going to get to enter it are the 2 spies that gave a good report. Those were Joshua and Caleb." That's the event that Hebrews 3 here, beginning in verse 7, is talking about when the nation provoked God and tempted him in the wilderness and refused to enter his rest. Instead of moving on in faith, they turned back in fear.